So I don't know if I should admit it, but I will anyway. I've always been fascinated by all the technology news, and of course I've been reading sci-fi since I was about yay tall. And I don't know, some of you I'm sure have heard about this new artificial intelligence, which is supposedly really good at generating human-like language. And this is one of those things where they've opened it up to anybody so the AI can learn a little more. And I had heard about this, and it was early morning last week before anybody else was anybody else in the house was up. And I thought, I wonder if this thing could generate a Christmas sermon. What's the worst that could happen? And so I figured out how to log in because it's free, because they want the AI to learn. And so I figured out how to log in, and I said, generate a Christmas sermon. And it came back. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house, not a creature. It's not quite what I was hoping for. So I said, maybe I have to be more specific. And I said, okay, generate a Christmas sermon in the style of Martin Luther. And then it just said to me that the Pope was the Antichrist 500 times. And I went, that doesn't help either. And I have a suspicion that part of what was going on with the AI is the same thing that goes on with all preachers. You see, when you're talking at Christmas, you've got this interesting range of experiences in a room like this. You've got the people who've been at every Christmas service for 95 years and knows the story backwards and forwards as well as any pastor or preacher. And you've got some of you out there who've never heard the story. Maybe you've just never been in church before, or churches you've been at has never told the story. Or maybe you've just never been in a place where you can actually hear it. And so to be able to tell the story and ask those questions again, it's always hard to do in such a way that hits every part of that range. But that's what I want to do today. I want to just take a minute and retell the story. And then ask, what does this mean for us today? You see, the Christmas story happened 2,000 years ago, but it did not start 2,000 years ago. For millennia prior to the birth of Jesus, God had been promising his people that he was going to send someone. He was going to bring someone to make everything right. Somebody who would fix the problems and make things the way they were supposed to be. And so for generation after generation, when parents were expecting that new baby of the Israelite nation, they would ask themselves, maybe out loud, maybe just in the quiet of their own heart, is this the one? Is this the one who will save us? Is this the one who will be the consolation of Israel? Generation after generation, they waited. And there was the prophecies, and they knew some things about who this would be. They knew he would be born as a descendant of David, the greatest king of Israel. They knew that he would be born in Bethlehem. But there was always those questions. Is this the one? So when Mary and Joseph arrive in Israel, they know this is going to be the one. The angel Gabriel had visited Mary and told her what to expect. Joseph knew from a dream where God had spoken to him. And then so the time comes for this child to be born in a stable. And while they are there, they lay this new baby in a manger, a feeding trough. And as they do that, these shepherds arrive. And the shepherds arrive and say, we met an angel, and the angel told us, this is the one. This is the one that we've been waiting for. The one who will make everything right. This is what God has sent us. And what I want to talk about for a couple of minutes is a couple of characters who aren't in that part of the story, because I think they hit us in a different way. You see, the story of the wise men is a fascinating one. And the story of a wise man doesn't happen right at that time. The story of the wise men happens later. See, these guys are living off to the east in some place which today would be Iran or Iraq, some part of the Persian Empire. And they're astrologers. They watch the skies and they see the portents. And so when they see something in the sky, they head out. It might have been a conjunction of planets. It might have been a comet. It might have been something supernatural. But they see something that they recognize as God's handiwork. And so they come. And I find them so fascinating because they're outsiders. They're not part of this tradition. They haven't been waiting for millennia for the Messiah to have been born. They just recognize the strangeness of what God is doing. And so they want to be a part of it. Now, that gives us something to hit on. If I might be just perhaps a bit indelicate, I'm just going to make an observation. I don't want to shame anybody. But there are a few more people here today than we have on a normal Sunday. I don't want to make any fun of anybody. But that tells us something. See, just as there are more people here today, I don't think it's because of the tradition. Might be a part of that. I don't think it's you're here because somebody dragged you here. You didn't want to disappoint grandma. But I think it's fundamentally deep in your heart. You know there's something more going on than simply tradition or family celebrations. I think in your hearts, you recognize that God did something on that night 2,000 years ago, the same way the wise men did. And I love the way the wise men story is told because it grapples with the outsiders, the people who are normally not part of these discussions. The wise men never went to the temple. They never sang any of the Psalms. They never did any of that thing. But they recognized that God was doing something, that God was showing up. Let me come at this from a different angle. There's a British actor by the name of Russell Brand. And I ran across a quote of his last week, which just kind of hit me between the eyes. He said, look, I don't have a drug or an alcohol problem. He says, I have a reality problem. I use drugs and alcohol to cope with reality. And I read that and I'm like, that guy is brilliant. Because he recognizes the human brokenness and the problem that we have in this world. And if we're honest with ourselves, we get it. As much as we love this time of year, as much as we love the holidays and the cookies and the celebrations and the getting together, we recognize that most of us have a brokenness in our lives. Some of us, it comes at guilt that keeps us up at the night, that we're just worried about something we did or left undone. For some of us, it's busted relationships where we're sitting there thinking about people that we feel like we can't talk to, we can't be honest, we can't communicate with anymore. Some of us, we feel hopeless or alone or not having purpose. And that, friends, is our reality problem. Friends, God didn't send his only begotten Son to this world, to Bethlehem 2,000 years ago, to give you your best life now. He didn't give it to you. He didn't come to give you self-esteem or give you anything else. He came to fix reality. And that's what the shepherds were recognizing. That's what we recognize here on a day like today. And that's why we're here even when normally we're not. So what does that mean for us? What does that mean to have that reality fixed? It means that we go from trying to stumble through life. You know how it is with all those things piling up, and you feel like you are shuffling in those tiny little steps across a ice-crossed, windy parking lot, just to pick a perfectly hypothetical example. To being able to live in the light. We are going to light candles here in a minute to celebrate this day, because that is a physical manifestation of seeing the light of God. So we just heard from Bud reading from Isaiah. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. What it means for us is we live in the light now. And I want to lay this out in front of you. I want to give you this challenge on Christmas. Don't let it go to waste. Don't go back to living in the dark. You see, wherever you've been, I know the last few years have not been easy for anybody. But that God doesn't promise easy. When Jesus showed up, he didn't say, everything's going to be fine. What he promised was, he'd be the Prince of Peace. Learned something interesting this week. I want to focus in on that term, the Prince of Peace. You see, there's all these titles that Jesus is associated with, but that peace one, I think, means a lot. And most of us, if you ask what it means to be at peace, you think, well, I want to sit by the fire with a warm drink in hand and just be able to relax. I want to rest. But peace means more than that. The Hebrew word is shalom, and if you go to Israel today, you will be greeted constantly with that term, shalom. And it's a great term. But it means more than simply the absence of conflict. It means completeness. So, for instance, if you're building a wall and you put that last brick in, that wall is complete. It is at peace. It is shalom. And so when Jesus says he's the Prince of Peace, what he's offering you is completeness. To not feel like those busted relationships define you. To not feel like there's no hope. And so my challenge for you this year is to live in that peace, that sense of completion, and to take those next steps forward in being in relationship with God. That day 2,000 years ago was a new invitation from Jesus to say, come with me, that we can live this world together in a new way, in his peace, now and forevermore. Amen.